Before we get into today's show, I just want to take a minute to say thank you. It's because of loyal listeners like you that we're able to equip and empower leaders at work and at home to stop drowning in the waves of their circumstances and instead build their life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. And would you do me a favor? If you're really enjoying the show, would you mind to rate the show on whatever platform it is that you watch or listen to us? We hope we've earned 5 stars in your book, and that rating will help us to continue serving those in leadership. And also, feel free to share it with your friends, your family, your coworkers, or anybody else who wants to grow in their leadership. Thank you so much. Now on to the show.
And that's where trust breaks down, and you can't hold anybody accountable for anything because nobody knows what's going on. So smooth workflows, well-defined goals, transparency within an organization, that's what creates the conditions with which we can hold people accountable, and then trust is what follows.
This is the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, where we equip and empower leaders like you to thrive in and create harmony between your professional and personal lives. I'm your host, Bethany Reese, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking with Dr. Andrew Temte about how to balance trust and accountability to keep our workflows smooth during continuously challenging and hectic times. Dr. Andrew Temte, CFA, is the former CEO of Kaplan Professional. He's the author of Balancing Act, Teach, Coach, Mentor, Inspire, and the book, The Balanced Business, Building Organizational Trust and Accountability Through Smooth Workflows. And he's also the host of the Balancing Act podcast. A thought leader on issues related to organizational health, continuous improvement, and workforce reskilling, his articles have appeared in a number of media outlets. His blend of higher education and professional education experience gives Dr. Temte a unique perspective over the issues surrounding the future of employment and workplace relevance. Dr. Temte earned his doctorate in finance from the University of Iowa with a concentration in international finance and investment theory. He holds the CFA designation and has over 14 years of university teaching experience. Welcome to the Leadership on the Rocks podcast, Dr. Temte. We are so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me on, Bethany.
And well, I love the books. I love your work and what you're doing. Your podcast is fabulous. And so I really wanted to have you on because I want to talk about 2 things I'm very passionate about. And you just so happen to be an expert in these 2 areas. And it is trust and accountability. I think these are so important, yet we're not always so good with them. So can you just start us off with just a definition of those 2 concepts? What do you mean whenever you're talking about trust and accountability, specifically when it comes to leadership?
Right. So what I'm trying to do, the platform that I'm standing on is the intersection between the tenets of organizational health, clarity, communication, everybody trusting and relying on one another, and the world of continuous improvement, smooth workflows, identifying, minimizing waste in an organization. And it just so happens that continuous improvement overlaps with organizational health, because in the continuous improvement world, one should also be very, very focused on your people resources. So that's where the 2 come together. And the business world has tilted over the last 10 or 15 years much more toward the trust, everybody get along, bring one's whole self into the world of work, which I fully endorse and embrace. And we've kind of left accountability behind. And it's very, in one of the main points of my second book, is that there is a balancing act between trust and accountability. And the way that one executes that balancing act is through the concept of establishing smooth workflows in the business that you're operating.
Man, something that just occurred to me, and I love this fact. You are a numbers guy, right? Finance, as some people would say, bean counters. But the first thing you started off with was talking about people. And I love that about you because so often leaders can focus on tasks, especially, that's our lane, let's execute. But you started off with the whole people narrative. So talk to us, especially you being focused, in that world of finance. How can we grow in that skill set of focusing on people first so that we can have continuous improvement and all the other things that you were talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. I, as you mentioned, I come from this world of hard numbers and and spreadsheets and all of that. The what started my journey into the behavioral side of the equation was in the late 1980s, early 1990s, in the world of finance, and especially investments finance. We started talking about behavioral finance, that it's not just all about the efficient frontier that you're creating for an investment portfolio and the risk reward trade-off, but it's also how we feel about the investments that we're making. And researchers in investments finance were really starting to wake up to this fact, that which is now a proven fact, that our behavior has just as much to do with investment performance as the risk reward trade-offs and the numbers that we're all and the performance history that we're all looking at. So extend that into the business community, where I grew up in the late 1990s, early 2000s as a leader. I had a very prescriptive approach to leadership. It was my way or the highway. I operated what I like to affectionately call the Andy said leadership style, where really nothing got done in the business without me laying my thumb on the scale and approving everything that's going on. Well, first of all, that's not sustainable.
Yes.
and second of all, it turns out that your people really don't like that. People like to be empowered. People like to be trusted. People like to make their mark on the world. And it was through the late 2000s, and especially coming out of the Great Recession, that these worlds of continuous improvement and organizational health really came to the fore. And having a people first approach really started to come into view for me.
Absolutely. For you new leaders out there, or people wanting to step into leadership, I need to stop and recognize the wisdom coming out of Dr. Temte's mouth. You need to listen to this, because a lot of times you think that you have something to prove and you come in hot and heavy, right? And with a heavy hand. And seasoned leaders just know that that's not the way. You're going to make mistakes, as he was talking about. But definitely rewind what he just said and listen to it, because it's such truth. Now I want to step into, you said the intersection of organizational health and the continuous improvement. We have such buzzwords, let's just call them buzzwords, in leadership and business, that I know a lot of people listening are like, ugh, the eye roll thing. But they're so needed and so true. How can we get past the whole, these buzzwords means I have to do more work, versus no, these are what they are and why they're so important? Can you help us change our mindset about those two things? Because the intersection, like you said, is so important.
Yeah. So I'm not a one person crusade here, but I'm really adamant over the course of the next few years to start to change the mindset, especially in the continuous improvement world. You use the phrase hot and heavy, coming in with a heavy hand. A lot of continuous improvement experts, despite their best efforts, come across as This is a new language. It's a new way of working. There's all this foreign terminology, and you've got to adopt the entire suite. It's all or nothing in the world of continuous improvement. And the another truth is that humans abhor change. We like the status quo. We like the way things have always been done. So anything that's going to come in and rock our world is something that we immediately push back on, whether consciously or not. It is part of who we are as human beings to reject change. So the world of continuous improvement in many, many organizations is a gigantic change to business as usual, especially if an organization is populated by what I call accidental managers who are firefighters and hall monitors. They've grown up in a leadership and a management role without really studying the philosophy and the behind leadership and management. So these accidental managers become firefighters. Job protectionism becomes the status quo. I'm the only one that knows how to do X, Y, or Z, so that's the kind of chaos, the chaos that a team or an organization lives with, kind of is worn as a nice fuzzy security blanket. So when the continuous improvement folks come in and say, "We're going to change this," it is almost always going to fail.
Yes.
So long-winded answer to what is really at the end of the day, a very short answer, which is continuous improvement is about three things. It's about having a maniacal focus on your customer. It's about respecting your people, and it's about identifying and minimizing the waste in your organization, all of which frees up resources to do new and interesting things, to innovate, to grow, both as humans and as an organization. And at the end of the day, it's all about adding value to one's customer. So,
yeah. And I love the way that you did that, because really you talked about the root of the problem first. And then you're like, and then here's the answer, the short answer to that. And that's so true and so needed, because what happens oftentimes is we know that we need to implement continuous improvement. Let's go buy a packaged program and just ram it through the system, through all the cogs. And it doesn't align to the heart behind it of this is why we do this. And I think a lot of leaders, skip that step. Here's just another task we've got to accomplish. Let's just push it through. And I love that you're getting to the heart of that. Number one, if you are in leadership, then you need to be studying leadership. It is not okay with the skills you have today to take a leadership position and stay there, status quo, right? I love that about what you just said. So we have continuous improvement. We have organizational health. I want to take a little quick trip around the organizational health concept. Because again, a lot of people can take that survey and then one, they never share the results, or maybe two, they'll share it, but nothing really changes. So can you talk to us about organizational health? What is it? Why is it important? And then we'll get into some blueprints of, after we understand these two things, now let's talk about a blueprint of how we do. But again, what is organizational health and why is it important?
So I would encourage your listeners to obviously buy my book, but there's another gentleman that your listeners should be aware of, and his name is Patrick Lencioni. Patrick Lencioni is the father, if you will, of the world of organizational health. And to me, Patrick Lencioni goes through a fairly prescriptive approach of do this, do this, do this, do this. But for me, it all comes down to clarity, communication, excellence in goal setting, and having and and having everything in your organization wrapped around the concept of purpose. So I start, it's not a fluke that I start my second book off with the concept of organizational purpose. Why are we here? Why do we exist? What are we doing? And answering that fundamental question at the leadership level, having a belief system at the leadership level that propagates through the organization that all aligns with organizational purpose. And this is hard work. A lot of leaders don't want to do this work because you got to sit in a room with your colleagues and you have to play catch ball with lots of groups of folks to really identify why we exist and why we're here. It's not a half an hour, come up with some pithy statement or outsource it to some third-party marketing firm to identify your purpose. Just like my personal purpose, which is to teach, coach, mentor, and hopefully inspire, an organizational purpose needs to be felt at the highest level of the organization. And it's around purpose that then we can create our vision. Where are we all going? Where are we headed? Where do we want to be in X period, Y period? Once you've got those things established, then you can start the process of creating goals, and everybody can start to see where their individual contributions along the value stream then make an impact on the broader organizational goals that have been set by senior leadership. And we just communicate, clarify. And I'm telling you, that is one of the hardest things for a leader, especially a new leader, to wrap their head around is, well, what do you mean I don't get to say this once and everybody's going to get it? You mean I have to say this over and over and over again? What do you mean Susie isn't processing this? What do you mean she doesn't get it? She's heard it 8 times. Well, we are all different. We all process information differently. There's no one size fits all prescription to communication. And so as a leader, you just got to keep getting after it until you are just sick of communicating the message.
Yes. And people need to realize at the higher levels of leadership, they're going to be talking about it way more, but by the time it, filters down, I mean, the people that are individual contributors, maybe they've only heard it a couple times, where it feels like in top leadership, you're saying it all the time. That's why you got to keep saying it, right? Because it takes so long to filter down. And I love it. Never in there where you like, say it once, they got it. You were the opposite of that. You've got to talk all the time. It's so true. So now I'm ready to really dive into your book because it's so good. You've talked about the importance of the intersection. Guys, listen, if you don't want a train wreck in your leadership, you've got to be aware of the intersection of organizational health and continuous improvement. All right. One is on the inside, one is focused on serving the outside. And then you've come in with this blueprint of saying, okay, now let's talk about trust and accountability. So can you walk us through how do we grow in that balancing act between I trust you to do your job and do it well, but also we're going to have conversations when, things aren't going well or when things are, and I'm going to push you to the next level. So talk to us about that balance between the two.
Yeah. So as the subtitle of the book, when you write a book and you have to define the subtitle of your book, it takes a long time, just like that defining organizational purpose. And the if you will, all wraps around the concept of smooth workflows. I had a gigantic aha moment in my career. The small company that my mentor Carl Schweizer and I built in the 1990s was sold to Kaplan in 1999. We had a period of tremendous growth through the late 90s and into the late 2000s. And then it was post the Great Recession, and we started to adopt the principles of continuous improvement.
Mhm.
We started building what are known as process maps for how does product A get from idea to the customer, and how do we know what everybody is doing along that value stream? So I'd like your listeners to literally think about a stream that's coming out of a mountainside and dumping into a larger river or the ocean of consumer demand.
Mhm.
And you, as an individual contributor or as a team leader, you sit along that value stream, and you are adding value to whatever product or service you're delivering to the customer. Well, back at Kaplan Professional, I'm probably in 2011 here, we ran a process map for the product line that I started with Carl Swayzer back in 1990. And the shocker was we sat in that room for 3 days and nobody knew exactly how the product got from start to delivery to the customer.
And that happens a lot.
There was no well identified product map to be found. There'd be these places, well, I think so and so does this here, but I can't really be sure. And then they would dig in and find another rat's nest, a couple of rattlesnakes in there. And this was our bread and butter. This was our most profitable product, and nobody knew. There was no process map to be found. So that was like, oh my gosh, what else is going on? No wonder everybody's looking over their shoulder. No wonder everybody is kind of walking on eggshells around each other, and really can't hold one another accountable because nobody knew what the next step was. So yeah, everybody got frustrated with how things were going, but we couldn't put our finger on it. So then fast forward to a proper value stream where everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Jobs and information, job descriptions, or what I call what is called standard work in continuous improvement parlance. The standard work of one team is known by another team. What one team is measuring is known by other teams. How one team is being evaluated is known by other teams, so that we can have very smooth workflows, and expectations are leveled across teams, because that's where trust breaks down most often. Is Billy is sitting there with a catcher's mitt waiting for some part of the process to come to him so that he can do his job. Susie's on the other side going, well, Billy doesn't need this yet. I'm going to go off and do something else. Billy is fuming because he's not getting, and then once Billy gets it, it needs rework, redo, because Susie didn't really know what Billy needed in the first place. And that's where trust breaks down, and you can't hold anybody accountable for anything because nobody knows what's going on. So smooth workflows, well-defined goals, transparency within an organization, that's what creates the conditions with which we can hold people accountable. And then trust is what follows. You can't walk into a team or an organization and say, okay, we're going to throw a bunch of bean bags today and do some trust falls, and you're going to, and we're going to do some Myers-Briggs, and everybody's going to know how everybody else ticks, and you're going to trust each other after this.
Yeah.
Doesn't work that way.
No. A lot of times trust is built through a lot of encounters, and then conflict on how people react with one another. But I want to back up the whole time. And I love the visual that you've given. Guys, think about that stream. And what happens in a lot, and I don't want to generalize too much, but in a lot of organizations, you have silos, people not talking to other people. And then when things go wrong, and they will go wrong because you haven't communicated, you don't have trust, you don't have accountability, it's like finger pointing constantly with, well, this is the reason that we're late, behind budget, behind schedule, or the product stinks or whatever. And the advice Dr. Temte is giving you is how to fix all of that. So develop that process map and higher up organizational leaders, listen. It is on you to get the people in the room to have that conversation of, here is our ultimate purpose goal, right? All of those things that he was talking about. And here is the process on how we do what we do. And so everybody knows they have a piece of the pie. And I even want to back up. There's a lot of, let's just call it quiet quitting. That's another buzzword kind of being used. Whenever nobody sees me, nobody notices, nobody really knows what I do, right? And so we can kind of slough off our work. But when people know me, when people know what I do and the value that I bring, it makes me just stand up a little straighter, a little taller, and saying, I add value. Right. And so everything he's telling you is going to fix, like, one of the biggest problems you're dealing with is get that process map, bring people in, let them learn about what's going on. I thank you for all of that. I just can't even tell you. I was in education forever, and it was just such a huge problem there. But then as I work with people, I'm seeing, oh, that's the same problem. Y'all just don't talk.
Yeah. I had to choose a title for the book, but it could be called The Balanced Institution. It could be called The Balanced School System. Mm-hmm. It doesn't just apply what I'm talking about doesn't just apply mm-hmm. to the world of business. It applies to government. It applies to anything, wherever we've got value streams in the world. My work is applicable.
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up, because so many times we look to leadership gurus within our specific lane. And again, that'll keep you in status quo, of just that thought process. Yes, you need to know best practices in your field, but man, want to talk about personal growth and leadership, that's where you start looking at other lanes and saying, wow, what are they doing that's working? How can I apply those principles? A principle is always true, like gravity, right? Gravity will always pull you down. So leadership principles are always true, no matter the industry. So I strongly encourage you to get this book. You're going to learn leadership principles that you need to avoid the train wrecks and stop the firefighting. It's so good. And well, Dr. Temte, I thank you so much for everything that you've shared. So what are some key takeaways that our listeners need to apply in order to grow in their leadership?
Well, I think one thing that we haven't really hit on, everything in the second book focuses on this concept of a value stream. But where is that value stream going? It is going to satisfy a customer. Right. So understanding one's customer is absolutely essential to the whole equation. And the firefighting analogies that management analyses or analogies that we've used, you talked about silos, fiefdoms, kingdoms that are built within organizations, where we start fighting with one another for scarce resources, shifting blame. Oh, everything is really cool in here. The problem is over there. Please look over there, right? Once the organization really focuses its energy on the customer, and as a leader, you start teaching and coaching your team members to see exactly how their work impacts the value stream, which ultimately is going to create a satisfied customer, which creates this awesome feedback loop in the form of a paycheck that supports you and your family. Mm-hmm. So many folks work in institutions and organizations and don't think about the customer every day. And that's one of the big takeaways that I'd like your listeners to have is, if you haven't done serious work about who is my customer,
Mhm.
what value am I providing to my customer? How do I differentiate myself? And I'm talking about the organization as an entity here. But how do I differentiate? What do we do? I mean, these are basic questions that I challenge your listeners, especially at the higher levels of the organization. Sit in a room with the question, what do we do?
Yeah.
And answer that question with your 6, 7, 8 team members, and see how long it takes you to get through that question. And don't just let, again, a pithy statement come out. Really get deep on it. Challenge your folks. I bet if you got 8 people, you're going to get 8 different answers at the front, and you're going to have to iterate to get there. So it's all about the customer at the end of the day.
Man, I love that perspective that you're bringing, because so often, again, we can get like blinders on. I'm so focused on completing my task that I forget who it is I'm serving to begin with. And that applies, that principle not only applies at work, man, it applies at home, right? We can get so busy doing the thing that we do that we forget who we're serving to begin with. And so it's like a beautiful loop. You've come back full circle of the way you started. People. It's about people. And you have a customer on the other end of what you're doing. It doesn't matter the product or the service that you're creating. There's people on the other end of that, and it is about them. And so much of that is threaded through how can we change our lenses to where we're not self-focused, but servant focused, right? That service of who we're serving. So thank you so much for reminding us of that. I'm so glad you mentioned that. I skipped right over it. And well, is there any other pieces of wisdom that you would love to share with us? Because Lord knows you have plenty.
Yeah. So one word, and that is, 2 words, compassion and vulnerability. So compassion is boiled down to empathy plus a willingness to do something about it. So we talk a lot about in modern business vernacular about empathetic leadership. I challenge that. I think it needs to be compassionate leadership, because as a leader, you need to be able to really listen and hear what's going on, and then be able to put yourself in those shoes and then do something about it, or be very clear that we're not going to do something about it and we're going to do something else instead. And then the second is vulnerability. We have to, in order to stop all the finger pointing, we've got to be able to sit back and go, wow, could this really be me? Could I be the root cause or part of the root cause of a challenge that we're facing? So those 2 things together, I think are very important for your listeners.
It's so good. Do not miss the main point of this of, yes, you have a job to do, but the people side, the relationship side, the communication side is the foundation on which you build everything else, right? And then you can look to how can we better serve, but you got to stay focused, keep that perspective on the people. That is so amazing. Well, all right. I always ask our listeners, and I want to know, you've given us such great advice. What is one poor decision that you would tell us to avoid? Like, don't do this.
So, very timely, because I was working on an article for another publication this morning, and that is, do not forget about how hard change is. We, at the top of our time together today, we talked about how humans abhor change. It's built into our psyche. Everybody navigates through change differently, and management, almost by definition, has to make assumptions about how their people are going to navigate through change. So we lump groups together. We then assume that those groups are going to march through some change at a consistent pace. And those assumptions are flawed, because even within a team of 6 or 8, there are 6 or 8 different change management curves that individuals are navigating through it. And so do not simply assume that your team or your organization is all going to go through an acquisition, a new product launch, a shift in goals, or organizational direction in the same way, with the same cadence. It just does not work that way.
Oh, it's so good. That makes me think of the old adage, you know what happens whenever you assume, you make it out of you and me. There you go. And well, thank you so much. So where can our listeners go to learn more about you, your work, and where can they go to buy your book?
So my website is andrewtemte.com, all one string, no P in Temte. So, and I'm sure you'll have it on your website. So everything is there. I have a personal purpose, personal planning guidebook. That's a free download for folks to engage with, so that you can align your personal purpose with the work that you're doing. So find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, Instagram. I got off Twitter, now X, earlier this year, because my mental health was being was being challenged. So you can still find me there, but there's nothing to find.
Yeah, man. Well, thank you so much. And I will have everything in the show notes. And if you sign up for our newsletter, you'll get it in there as well. Dr. Temte, thank you so much for your time today and all of the wisdom that you shared. It is so seasoned with salt. I hope people listen to this episode twice to just marinate on all of the principles and the truths that you shared. And I just thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Bethany.
All right, guys, until next time, continue putting in the work of building your life and leadership on the rocks, the essential rocks. God bless. Remember, the most essential rock you can build your life and leadership on is the rock of Jesus Christ. Today's Bible verse comes from Proverbs 3, verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding.